Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Nivas. I head marketing at SpendFlow. We are an AI procurement platform that helps companies kind of from all the way from intake to the pay process. We typically sell to mid-market and enterprise companies in the US. 80% of our customers today are based in the US. And that's mostly about me, but this webinar is not primarily around me or the work but it's more around Sharon. So, Sharon, I think I'd let you do the introduction on what you've done at PriceLabs, how long have you been there, and I'll follow it up with questions, and then we can move into the deck as well.
Sure thing. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for spending the time to join us today. My name is Sharon. I'm the VP of Marketing at PriceLabs. I recognize some of the people on the call. From there, it was great to have you with us. My background is in product-led growth and particularly in B2B SaaS. So I joined PriceLabs in June of last year. And before that was at some other PLG companies like Hotjar, Testgorilla, and more recently at an AI startup in the language and translation space. So that's my background, always been in PLG. And that's one of the things we'll get into in a minute about the agent is how do you build email for product-led growth companies as opposed to sales-led growth companies.
If you could just walk us through PriceLabs, like what's the deal size that generally come into, and is there a trial period? Just setting context for so that they'll be able to relate to what we're talking about over here.
Absolutely. Yeah, for those who don't know PriceLabs is a dynamic pricing and revenue management platform for the vacation rental industry. So for anybody who has a property, very often a property they might be renting out on Airbnb or Booking.com or Vrbo, then we connect directly into those platforms as well as into property management systems, and we suggest and recommend the pricing for those properties every single night. So we currently price around 600,000 properties worldwide. We have over 60,000 customers using our software, and the deal size really varies. The deal size depends on the number of properties you have. If it's a single owner like myself, I have a second home in the mountains that I rent out, then the deal size is obviously very small, but we go up to the very large enterprises who have more than 1,000 properties that they manage. I see
Got it.
some questions in this chat about product-led growth and sales-led growth. We're actually going to cover predominantly product-led growth. And I think it's interesting. You'll see there's actually a lot of documentation and a lot of material online about how to write emails for sales-led growth. And the key experts in outbound email are actually coming from sales-led companies. And so actually one of our challenges was how do you write email in a product-led context. Yeah, so as the slide says that you can see, it was all about creating outbound email with an agent that we called Sherlock, and I'll explain a little bit later why we called him Sherlock. But as I said, in product-led growth, I'm going to go through. I've just discussed a little bit about PriceLabs, so I might skip over that slide. But I'm going to explain a bit more and delve a bit deeper on the problem we were facing and why did we do this? Because we were at a very interesting point when we took this decision that I think probably resonates with many people out there. Then I'll walk you through the solution and I'll talk through three particular challenges that we faced. We faced many challenges along the way, but these are the three that I think perhaps are most interesting and maybe most relatable to others. And finally, I'll end with what's the return on investment that we are seeing at the moment on Sherlock. So as I said, PriceLabs is dynamic pricing for vacation rentals. Now, the problem we were facing, we were very lucky in the sense that we had a database of 60,000 contacts who were not yet using PriceLabs. So this was a database that we had built up over quite considerable amount of time for people that were in our ICP, in our target audience, that we had not yet reached out to. And so we were looking at this, recognizing the opportunity cost that we had of not using this database and wondering how to go about unlocking it. And the biggest problem we faced was we actually had no resource. So we had no one in the team who had the capacity. We had people who had the capability for sure, but no one who had the capacity to really focus on trying to figure out what the right copy, the right messaging was to unlock this huge database that we had. Um, and as many of you know, recruiting is not very easy. And then at PriceLabs, we actually have a 3-week onboarding as well that every new PriceLabs team member goes through, which adds to the length of time before that person can obviously contribute. So we were estimating, and I think we were optimistic on this, that it would take 3 months from that moment for us to get a person on board who could unlock this database. And that was the challenge and the decision that we were facing. Do we spend and invest that 3 months on recruiting, or do we just say, hey, let's go and try and build an AI agent? So in the end, as you know, we decided to build the AI agent. We called the agent Sherlock. We actually, I'm sure many of you do this, we name all of our agents, and that's just because it was starting to get so confusing and people wouldn't be having a conversation and say, oh, I'll get the agent to do that. People didn't know which agent they were talking about. So now we name them. And we called this one Sherlock because of how much research it does on an individual before it goes into the writing phase. So what does Sherlock do? Well, Sherlock, first of all, researches, and it researches 12 things about the individual, any individual from our database. So we're in the property space. So the most important things that are interesting for us to know are things like, is it a company who are expanding the number of properties that they own or that they manage? If we have access, which you do sometimes on direct booking websites, we want to know, are they doing well? Is their calendar full of bookings, or the reverse? Are they struggling to fill those bookings? We want to know the typical things that you would want to know anytime, like what are they posting on social media? So what's interesting to them, and anything that's happening with their company, anything that's relevant to them. Those are more typical things that I think every company would do. The ones that were perhaps more specific to us were things like, what are the reviews that they're getting on their properties? Are they currently using dynamic pricing? If we can tell that from the direct booking website, we can see if the pricing per day is different or not. And then, as I said, whether or not they were actually getting reservations. Now, once the agent goes through all of that research, it tries to match anything that it finds with one of our case studies. So if somebody mentions on LinkedIn that, that they're expanding their portfolio and therefore their workload is growing, then it might start to match it with one of our case studies on how do you save time? How to use PriceLabs to save time. Or if somebody mentioned on LinkedIn that in their particular region, they're struggling because of whatever might be happening, then it might match it with a case study on, how do you handle demand when, how do you manage pricing when demand drops, and things like that. So it's constantly looking and updating itself on all of the customer success stories and all of the blogs that we have on our website, and trying to match them with what it's finding out about the individual.
These signals are super contextual to your industry, right? And this is brilliant, right? I'm just trying to draw parallels for what we do at SpendFlow, and I'm pretty sure the audience. But how did you arrive at these 12 signals? Did you because most of the times when I think of it, I'm like, where do you even get this, right? So that's how it kind of probably becomes a blocker in my head. Just curious, how did you first arrive at these signals? And also, I'm guessing your industry has tools to let you know about calendar gaps or poor reviews and things like that. But just want to understand how. Can you double click on that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really a wish list to start with. So we just sat down and asked ourselves, if we were going to get on a call with a customer, what would we want to know before we got in front of that customer? And what would we do as people before having a conversation with a customer? And so most of this is what we just would have done in our usual day to day, either as marketers getting on product marketing research calls with customers, or as salespeople getting on account management calls. And we always want to know how the customer is doing. So we're always looking at their website and, is their property portfolio expanding or not expanding, that kind of thing is sort of natural to do as human. And then we thought about, what else would we love to know? So things like, new airline routes, new regulation. We don't always know when we're going into a customer conversation because it's pretty hard to find that out generally. But we thought, We would just love to know that information. So really, to begin with, it was a wish list of, well, let's see what we can do. Let's see what the agent can find. And it turned out some of this is not useful because it was a wish list to start with, and 12 was a lot. The thing which we assumed would be useful, but turned out to be not as useful, is actually the LinkedIn posts. So in our industry, I guess because people are out and about in the hotel or in the vacation rental, they're maybe less on social media. People don't tend to post as much on LinkedIn. So that is not as useful as maybe as in other industries.
I think you've just touched the nerve of almost every SaaS marketer or AI marketer out there, right? So Shreya has a question, I think, on the second point. When you say matching customer case studies with what people mention on their LinkedIn, do you comment with the case study on their LinkedIn post? I think I have, but yeah, Sharon, I'll let you answer.
Yeah. So we do actually, we reference in the email, we'll say, if they do, as I said, they don't always post on social media, but if they do, we'll say, oh, we saw your post, see that you're struggling with this, or that you've got this happening. We had a customer in a similar situation. Here's a link to the customer case study.
So you're basically usually always finding signals as to what these prospects are like posting or their pain points on different social media. Is that what you mean, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If they are, or any news that they are posting on their corporate websites, etc. But if we can identify any pain point, if they talk about any pain points, we'll try and match that to how with another customer where we've solved that pain point for that customer. And it's great that we're diving a bit deeper on this, because this is actually the point. This is the thing that more people click on. So out of all of the emails that we've sent and all of the material and information that Sherlock sends out, it seems like what people react to most is the customer stories.
And what's the emailing stack look like, Sharon? If you could deep dive a little, because we also keep hearing about how email's gone for a toss. So what are some practices that has been like, because when you say 60,000, right, like that's a fairly large base that you're hitting up. So some things that have worked in the favor of PriceLabs would be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, so we don't email all 60,000, of course.
Right.
We email a set percentage at a time, also so that we learn and hopefully the emails get better over time. Use Smart Leads as the email deliverability platform. We obviously have a lot of domains that we are constantly warming up. There's a lot of work from our email infrastructure team to make sure that the infrastructure is ready to deliver outbound email. And that's obviously critical, because if you can't deliver it, then no point you writing nice emails if it doesn't actually go anywhere. So that's a big part of what goes on behind the scenes here. Great.
So also, what is the is the prompt, or what is the flow for writing that 5 email sequence? That sounds like a very straightforward thing, but like that can be the make or break. So just what does that look like?
Yeah, so we gave the prompt, we gave the agent an overall arching structure. Not sure if I'm going to remember all 5. But the first one for sure is a hook. So the first one is trying to find something really personalized and hooking with that. The second one from memory is more educational. It's saying, here's what you could, trying to help them understand that they have a problem. Here's what you're missing out on by not dynamic pricing. The third one will always share some sort of customer story or blog article. I think can't remember what the fourth one does it exactly. I think it's a little bit more heavy-handed on the sales. Hey, you haven't done it yet. It's about time. And then the fifth one is a polite step back, just letting people, pushing a little more on our free trial and saying the free trial is there and available for you whenever you want to. So that's the overall structure. We haven't yet experimented much with that overall structure, so we're still going with that. But that's one of our ideas is to play with that.
I think Santa has a question. Is the number 5 in terms of sequence length something you experimented or got to?
It's not something we've experimented on yet. It's what we took as best practice from our other emailing activities. But it's a great question and definitely something we want to keep experimenting on. Of course, if somebody reacts to one of the emails, we stop the sequence and they get a different sequence. But we haven't yet figured out whether that 5 is too few or too many. Yeah, we need to figure that out. Let me just go into exactly how Sherlock works. So Sherlock is actually 3 different workflows. There is the Sherlock, the researcher though. So this is the one that will go away and from our large database, it selects, and it's got XX here because we keep playing around with how many emails we give Sherlock a week, as we're never sure to scale up or whether we should keep experimenting with something. So we keep playing around with that, and that's one of the variables that we have. But we give Sherlock a certain number of variables once a week. It goes away and researches everything it can find on those people against the 12 triggers that I mentioned. And it then generates the 5 email sequences and the second workflow. So the second workflow is the email creation process. And then there is a third workflow, which is the approvals. And I'll come on to talk a little bit about this in a minute. But what the agent is doing is scoring each email against its own set of criteria. If it fails, it will go back and rewrite. And it also sends some of these to us for verification and approval. So what happened after the research is we get, or there is in the background, we can always look at it if we want to, we don't tend to, I have to say, we get something like this, which is a very big Google Sheet with all of that research that the agent has pulled about an individual. And it always makes me laugh because we always have these sophisticated LLMs and then behind it all is a Google Sheet. So it's pretty funny. But it's storing it here, and then when it's sending the emails, it's pulling it from here and sending it. So we'll keep changing this, but we'll define a certain number that we want to go every day. And that depends on everything else that we have going on, also on the deliverability and the infrastructure, also on whether we're experimenting something. So we've got that flexibility to play with the number of emails that we're sending out. But it will just pull from this spreadsheet after the research has been done and send those emails via Smart Lead.
Got it. Sharon, we have a question from Santosh. Can you define few of the criteria for approving emails?
Yeah, I'll tell you a few, Santosh, and we're actually going to go into it a little bit deeper. Many of the criteria are things that came up along the way, of things that the LLM got wrong as we were setting it up. And so we then had to put in place certain criteria to say, make sure you don't do this, or make sure you don't do that. So it's things like it really wants to be a salesperson. It really wants to get on a call with the customer. And so one of the criteria is, check that you haven't offered a call. So it's things criteria that we built up along the way to make sure that it's meeting the requirements that are very specific to us. And so this is one of the challenges because you don't know those things at the beginning. You can ask it to make sure that it's within a certain character limit or within a certain tone that you've set up, but you don't know until you start the things that it's going to get wrong. So this is one of the challenges along the way. Yeah. So
Okay,
let me
Sharon,
jump into
question, right? Assuming, do you also have a sales team that can handle the calls, assuming, right? Like, forget, I'm not necessarily talking about the agent asking for the call, but say the prospect says, hey, I'd love to know more. Can we jump on a call? Sometimes, actually, a lot of the times when, like with early stage startups, right, like they're very understaffed from a sales standpoint and they hate bad leads that come from marketing, right? They'd be like, okay, you've sent it to me too early in the day, right? So was there a situation like that? If yes, how did we tackle? Or if not, then let's just proceed. Maybe just my overthinking brain.
Oh, you're not overthinking at all. That exactly happened. One of the processes here is that it's an agent on one side, but it's definitely a human on the other. And we kind of expect the human to do what we're asking, which is click on the link or start the free trial. But very often the humans don't do that. And we didn't expect that. And so they'd start writing back to the agent. And so that initially was a bit of a problem because we were like, oh, okay, well, who's going to respond when the human actually writes back? So now what we have is all of those responses going into a Slack channel so that we can see them, because that also helps us to know if the agent is actually motivating our audience to do anything.
Is it also replying to these?
No, so the agent, Sherlock, does not reply. So if somebody replies, we figure that is a warm enough lead that we actually have one of us reply to that. But you're right that it's too early to send to a salesperson. So what we actually do is it comes into a Slack channel so we can see the response, but it also automatically raises a support ticket and our support team. So if they do ask for a call, it will be our support team that jump on a call.
We have a question from Shreya. Am I audible, Sharon?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah. What's the stack used for this research and how do you store it?
Yeah, great question. So we're using NRev. NRev have built the AI for us, and they are the ones that also have the ability to scrape LinkedIn to see where all of the posts, etc., are on LinkedIn, and they have built all of the research for us. behind the agent, and then it's being stored, as I said, in the Google Sheet. So all of that research is being stored directly in the Google Sheet. So you can go in and look at it, but it's really for the agent to ingest it when it's creating the email.
We have a question from Sai. I just want to finish this one. I think, are these sequences only catered to one of problem aware, solution aware, or decision aware prospects, or a combination of these three? The context, the tone, and the content all would be different accordingly, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so we assume that these customers don't know about PriceLabs. They are certainly not customers that have ever interacted with us or that we know of. So if they contacted us or been at an event that we're at, we would have marked them differently on our database. If they've ever clicked or gone to one of our webinars, for example, we would mark them differently on our database. So they are not any user or anyone that's interacted with us. So we assume that they are very much at the top of the funnel, and we sort of go between assuming that they are problem unaware. So sometimes we'll write about, in fact, most of the time we will assume that they are problem unaware, that they are not yet aware that dynamic pricing is a better solution to their pricing needs. And so, yeah, we're very much at that brand raising start of the journey.
I was of the opinion that they'd be problem aware because they're just trying to increase their profits. I think that's their problem. But I was more curious. Also, are there like a lot of other players similar to PriceLabs in the market that you like heavily compete with that they've made? Like, for example, is there like a 800-pound gorilla in the market that has made enough noise that you can just fast follow?
No, I mean, PriceLabs is very lucky. PriceLabs is the dominant player in the market, with one very big exception, I should say, which is Airbnb does have its own pricing solution. So that is kind of the gorilla in the market. So if your properties are only on Airbnb, there's a toggle inside the Airbnb that you can use their pricing solution. But apart from that, which doesn't solve the problems for most people in the market, PriceLabs is the largest company here. But it's surprising how few people in the vacation rental space are using dynamic pricing. We think, I've heard estimates, anywhere between 60 to 90% of vacation rental properties are still not using dynamic pricing. They're using static pricing or some kind of pricing where they go in and manually adjust it week on week.
Sharon, I'm curious to know if you use a different stack altogether for writing these emails. So NREV is what you use for researching all the different 12 signals that you mentioned. And then you sort of kind of store these data in a Google Sheet. And then what you do is probably use another AI to like access those Google Sheets and curate these emails for all of these prospects. And then you have
Exactly.
these lists in check, which is an internal list. Like, I'm very curious about the second and the third step, honestly, like, because there would be like 100 things that you'll probably discover about a prospect, or sometimes not even anything, right? So how do you really choose? Do you choose that which ones to send email based on who you get data for? Or like, how do you really go about it, right? And the third thing is, of course, like, what is your systems of checks and what do you really like what are the approval stack that you've set for it to like decide whether to set or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll come to that in a second. So the LLM is all ChatGPT. ChatGPT is creating the emails, etc. And it makes its choice on which piece of research based on a prioritization list that we have given it. So we have told it if it's got something about the individual, so if the individual writes on social media, that is at the highest prioritization. But there are some other things that we also know about our customers. We know that if there's an event happening in their city, that tends to help them understand that they need dynamic pricing, because if Bad Bunny comes to your city, suddenly hotel prices go crazy. And it could be an opportunity to optimize your pricing based on the increased demand that you're seeing. So that takes a heavier weight in the research as well. So things that we've learned from our customers over the past years that we've been operating the company, we've created that prioritization, and so we pass that knowledge on to the LLM. I'll go into your question on approvals is a great one. So I'll go into that here. To jump into the three challenges, as I said, the first challenge really was that ChatGPT was far too salesy. It really wanted to get on a call for a start. It was also very liked exclamation marks. In terms of tone of voice, it was very enthusiastic and everything was amazing and awesome, which is not generally how we speak. So we really had to give it a lot of guidance on the tone of voice. And so there was a lot of, it would write an email, would come back, and then would say, okay, not this, but this, a lot of times. And then all of that got inputted into the prompt. So as I say here, there's a lot of telling Sherlock what it can and what it can't say along the way. So you see on the right-hand side, that's part of the prompt. It can say things like start your free trial or take a look or see how it works. But all the things under avoid were things that it tried to do at one point or another. And then our list of things to avoid got longer and longer as we went along. So it wanted to audit their portfolio. It wanted to give them a independent consultation, definitely wanted to jump on a call. So those were all things that we had to start adding in. The other thing, which I don't think it's talked enough about, particularly when it comes to email, is the differences it makes when you're thinking about A/B testing. So, if you go back to how we all would have done email before, is we probably would have changed the subject line. We would have had 3 or 4 different subject lines in the same email copy in the body, and then we would have run that and tested it. But of course, you can't do that when an LLM is creating all of the copy, because all of the subject lines are different. So that idea of A/B testing really has to change, and it's not A/B testing so much anymore. Is it? Well, it is still variant and control, but what you're testing is the strategy as opposed to the individual copy and messaging. So, one of the things we started testing was the tone. So ChatGPT wanted to be more salesy, so we wanted to be more soft. And so we started allowing it to be more salesy on some and not on others. It tends to want to write longer, and we wanted to write shorter. So that's another thing that we tested. So you're testing overall strategies as opposed to this copy versus that copy, which is really quite a different approach. And then to get to the question on the approvals. So initially, we were very nervous about having an agent send emails directly to our prospects. And we started with all emails having to be approved by a human. So what you see in this Slack here is the emails that Sherlock would come out with, and then we would in Slack say approved or not approved, and then it would regenerate. If it approved, it would send it to Smart Leads to get sent. Or not approved, and it would regenerate. So to begin with, we approved every single one. And then we started dropping down to 1 in every 2, 1 in every 3. But then we just realized this was a complete waste of time. There were certain things I was checking for, or others in the team were checking for, things like, did it hallucinate the case study, for example? Did it say one of the things that we told it to avoid? And so in the end, what we did was we just sat down and we said, okay, we asked, what are you doing when you read these emails? What are you checking for? We made a list of that, and then we just put that into the prompt to say, check for these things and include it in the scoring that you have. It became even more of a waste of time when we initially started in English. Now we do it in all 6 languages that PriceLabs is available. I only speak, 2 is a push. I speak about 1.5 of those languages, if I'm honest. But I was only actually reviewing 2 of the languages. The other 4 I was saying, it looks like German. That's good enough. Off it goes, because I can't read it. And so it was just becoming pointless. So now what we do actually is that they all go automatically. We've reversed it. They all go automatically, and then every so often it will put something in Slack just so we can see what it's doing. But we are no longer, we don't have the ability to stop in Slack. It's just there for us to read.
Sharon, I have a question here. I love the way the Slack, because at least to initially build out the confidence of the sequences, I'd want to do this because I've seen some notoriously AI generated emails in the past. So just to avoid that impacting our brand, how long did this take to even set up? Maybe just the timelines of how many iterations or how long and things like that.
It's a great question. I don't know. I can't remember. We started from memory at the beginning of November. And by December, we're sending things on its own. So it probably took us a good 3 or 4 weeks to get to something where we felt that it was comfortable for the agent to email. But then we moved pretty quickly after that to being very comfortable with the agent. So I think in January, we started allowing rough timelines here, the agent to just send it on its own without it being approved by us. I have to say, NRev has been super helpful. They did all of the coding in terms of writing the prompt. The prompt is crazy long. I think I tried to export it into Google Doc at one point and it was 34 pages. So there's a lot that goes into the prompt. And obviously we keep expanding the prompt with don't do this, do this over time. So there's a lot of work involved in telling it at the tone of voice that we want and making it sound the way that we would want it to sound.
Sharon, I have one more question, which is because you're personalizing all of these emails for different prospects, right? Like, I'm guessing the scale of all of so how would you really function? For example, like if there are, say, 500 or even 1,000 prospects that you are curating emails for, would you have the AI send you all of those emails? Like, how did you go about it on a granular level?
Yeah, so initially we did. We started small initially, right? We started with 10 different users a day. And so initially we were reviewing as humans 50 emails a day. It would send us 10 new prospects and say, here are the 5 emails for these 10 prospects that I have written. And we would say yes or no. But you're right, it's a lot of work for a human, even at 50 emails. It's a lot of work for a human. And you find very quickly that as humans, we get bored super fast. Our attention spans are not very long. So scale is really difficult if there's a human in the loop. And that's why we decided to let the agent just go for it, because there was no way we could reach 1,000 prospects. And from memory, I think we are doing 1,000 right now, or 500 to 1,000, somewhere like that, every week. And it would be impossible for a human to review that many emails. Yeah. So so now the agent sends all of those emails by itself and then put some in the thread for us to read if we want to. We can of course go into the tool at any point in time and see what it's sent out. But I have to say we tend to rely on just looking at the thread and what is there. Great. Let me go on to just the final part of this, which is, what's in it for PriceLabs. We've been running it, as I said, for just over 3 months now. We started in November. I would say really got going in December. So December, January, February.
Just with your permission, because I think this is almost at the end. I'm going to let Sayanta, because he sent me a note right now that I forgot. We were supposed to bring him in a little earlier. So obviously, this webinar is being hosted by the team at NRev. They are launching. They've been live for a while, but I think now they're ready to go live on Product Hunt. Sayanta, do you want to quickly talk about NRev, and then Sharon can finish it off with this slide, and then we can go into further questions.
Sure, Nivas, thanks. It feels like I'm a YouTube ad coming into the middle of the really nice booking webinar. Yeah, I just wanted to also thank Sharon for coming in here and thank everybody for joining in. One of the things, especially around signal-based selling, that we've seen across different organizations is the success is based on the kind of how custom you can get with your signals, how really specific to your business and specific to your industry that you can get with your signals. And that's something that has really given those people ROI, whether they're doing LinkedIn outbound or whether they're doing, email. I think that specificity in signals help you get in front of your prospects ahead of your competitors. That's one thing that I loved about Sharon's approach on this. But quickly, a little about me and NRev. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of NRev. It's a workflow automation tool where you can build in. I remember she asking also, how do you plug it into different parts? Do you have different workflows? So yeah, these are different workflows that can function the way you want it to function. And it's primarily built on AI in the sense that it's built from prompts directly. So you don't need a lot of learning curve to build it. When Sharon started using it long back when we were just building, there was still a lot of technical stuff, which we tried to help the teams with. But now with tomorrow's launch, it's all about, AI building these workflows, AI brainstorming with you based on different learnings it has had over these 200 plus companies now, about more than 10,000 workflows that have been deployed. And we would love your help and support in our product and launch tomorrow. There's also a launch on LinkedIn. And of course, there are a few perks based on consulting sessions, as well as some help in building out these workflows if you get stuck anywhere. But I'm sure now we have a system that can build out workflows pretty well. So I'll give that back to Sharon there. The ad ends there. Back to you, Sharon.
Great. Thanks, Santa. Yes, and just before I jump into the ROI, I see a question from Vishak about the deliverability and the open rates. So we get very good deliverability, but I have to say, we have a whole email infrastructure team that work very, very hard on making sure we get good deliverability. So these are not the only outbound emails that we are sending. There's a lot of work going into making sure that those domains are well cared for, they're well warmed up, even before Sherlock reaches them. And to your other question about what the call to action is,
Question then is the person who does, sorry, just one question on the email warming. Is it an inbound, is it an in-house team, or is it an agency, or is it someone that you work with? Because I think that fundamentally becomes the question, because if you are working with someone external, I think, I mean, we're not trying to promote anything over here, but just trying to get like trusted recommendation.
yes, absolutely. No, we have our own in-house team for managing all of our emails. In addition, including Sherlock, we send about 1 million emails a month. So there's a lot of email activity going on at PriceLabs. So that's the reason why we actually have our own in-house team, and deliverability is making sure the infrastructure is ready and warmed and always up and working in it. And of course, things go wrong occasionally, but yeah, that's what they're there for. And Vishak, you asked about, do we ever route cold prospects in a different way? For us, we really are very focused on being a product-led growth company. And so we really believe that getting people into the product is by far the best experience that they can have. We want them in the product as fast as possible, like gets them to the aha moment as to why, how this can solve the problems that they have. So all of the CTAs, apart from the ones to the customer stories, all of the CTAs are start your free trial. So it's all about getting somebody in. To what we talked about earlier, I also don't think these people are warm enough for a demonstration. So I think we would probably annoy our sales team if we did try to get them on a sales call. And just let me finish off with what the ROI is. Yeah, we're getting about a 1.1% conversion rate, which from what we can see is pretty good across the industry. Many of the benchmarks in the industries are for sales-led email, so it's a little bit hard to tell, but we think we're pretty happy with that. And already, as you can tell, we've got a pretty good return on investment in what we've been doing with Sherlock. The other thing that's interesting about Sherlock is Sherlock now has many children, so doing this in this way, what has happened is others across the team have seen Sherlock and realized that they can use something similar for their own uses. So now we have one of Sherlock's children actually emails before any event that we are attending and does try to get people on a call. So for that one, we allow Sherlock to be a bit more salesy. And the goal of that is to get people to meet with our sales team at the event that we are going to. And we've got various other things going on with Sherlock in terms of other customer segments that Sherlock is now reaching out to, etc. So I'll stop sharing. And yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm happy
Yeah, I think we
to.
have one question from Sairanjan, who asks, is there any current check in place to ensure that the AI agents are not deviating from their assigned checklists? AI to oversee AI is sometimes a slippery slope, I've seen.
There's not. We do allow the AI to oversee the AI in this case. There's 2 checkpoints, I would say, but they're not very strict guardrails. One is that it does send, I think it's 1 in every 10 emails into the Slack thread for us to see, so we can always see what it's doing. But the second guardrail is we get the responses from the prospects. And many times, those responses are very simple, just out of office. But as you get that, you get to double, you see the initial email that they're responding to. We keep a pretty close track of whether there's any negative responses. So far, we've never had a response that says, stop sending me AI generated email or anything like that. The worst response we've had is someone saying, oh, I am a PriceLabs customer. And that was nothing to do with Sherlock. That was us getting the database wrong. So yeah, so far, the AI overseeing the AI is doing a pretty good job.
Do we have any other questions? Cool. I think that looks like it. Sharon, I totally loved this. I think it was very detailed and like a lot of questions getting answered. Hopefully, I think we are gonna. I'll probably hit you up with more questions when I'm trying to. And though I know we use NREV, but I don't think we've set up these systems. So I think I'm gonna ask you to kind of ensure we get these up and running for SpendFlow. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone joined us on a Tuesday, wherever you're logging in from. Thank you so much. Hope you found this helpful. And yeah, looking forward to catching up with you all again sometime soon. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, Nivas.
And all the best, Asanta, for the product hunt launch. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for that. Yeah. All fingers crossed.
Great success. I will
Thank
follow
you.
your product launch, Shanta. All the best for it again.
Thank you, Shreya.
Thank you,
Bye.
Shreya.